your dice, let's roll tonight. All the fun in the spotlight. Inside sharp and laughter bright. We're tuning in for delight.
Welcome in, everyone, to Roll for Insight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bill. I am the admin, server owner, and one of the many lovely instructors that we have here on Altrole. And today, I have a very special treat for all of you. Now, Roll for Insight is our interview series where we run through a mix of prepared questions and audience questions on GMing with our interview guest. And tonight, I am pleased to introduce our very own event team coordinator, a fantastic game master herself, the casting queen, Makayla. Makayla, how are you doing this evening?
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking. I am still buzzing off of 2 cups of tea, so we'll see if I can keep the energy up for the full hour. But alas, this is not about me. So, we are going to be diving into these questions here, but just as a reminder to those of you in the audience, if you have questions for Makayla, you can feel free to put them in the chat. But let's start off with a little bit about you, Makayla. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your history with tabletop gaming?
Of course. Well, you've already heard my name. It's Makayla. I've been playing D&D since probably around 2018. I started DMing a year later. Most of my games, let's be real, all of them are online. Who has that many friends?
Well, certainly not me.
That's why we're here, Bill. All on all roll.
Exactly. Yeah, we all came here to find friends, so that we could trick them into playing D&D with us.
I've tried.
Fantastic. So that's what, 2019 for DMing. That's 6 years now, just about, maybe 5, 6 years.
Yeah, almost consistently. Definitely had a few, maybe like half a year break once in a while, but for the most part, DMing and playing.
Very nice. Yeah, that is quite a storied career of DMing, considering that's like twice as long as I've been doing it. So very nice, very nice. So when we talk about DMing and GMing specifically, could you take a moment to kind of explain your preferred style of DMing? What are the things that you tend to focus on when you are running a game? Are you more story focused? Do you focus more on rules? Are you somewhere in between? What would you describe your style as?
Sometimes this can be unfortunate for some, but I am actually a really big rules person. For me, like if you don't have rules to a game, especially in D&D, then you are just like straight up doing make believe, which is fun. But I like to have a little bit of reason behind it. Uh, Although I would probably lean in between, but towards rules oriented.
Thank you so much for saying that. I feel so vindicated now because I love rules. I love them to death. I quote them all the time. I am the rules guy at the table, even when I'm not the DM. I need to get you in a game, is what I'm hearing though, because I need more than one person to reference anytime we need to look up a rule.
Oh,
It
it's
can't-
so
oh,
bad when
it's so bad.
when I'm playing in a game and my DM is like ruling something not rules as written, and I'm like, ooh, I want to say something so bad. But
I
I know
know.
I'll let it slide. It's not my game. And guess what? It's the benefit of the players. I'm not gonna stop that.
No, if your DM is letting your players get away with shenanigans, hey, I didn't see nothing, right? Excellent, excellent. With all of that in mind, to kind of summarize your general background with DMing, could you tell us a bit about the kind of games that you enjoy running the most, either with one shots or full campaigns? So, do you tend to lean more into high fantasy? Do you tend to mostly homebrew? Tell us more about what you enjoy running as a game master.
Sure. I prefer short campaigns, uh, probably stretching around 5 to 10 sessions, which probably leans into I tend to run modules, and it's I like to read it throughout. So anything really, really long is a hassle, right? Because you usually want to read the entire thing and then break it down to figure out, how you're going to run a module adventure. So the ones I tend to choose are compact and can, easily memorize it to a certain extent, at least to the important plot points. Uh,
Yes, I feel like that is so important, especially with modules, but just with games in general. I remember prepping my first campaign, and I was expecting like, oh, this is going to be 50 to 100 sessions. It's going to go on for years. Yeah, newsflash, it did not. But being able to just remember off the top of your head, hey, here's what the game's about, very, very helpful. I am definitely in that same boat. My games tend to be around 5 to 10 sessions. I think my last campaign was 9 sessions. But yeah, that's really great. I really appreciate when GMs don't try to do the whole like multi-year level 1 to 20 campaign right off the bat, because as we all know, scheduling will get in the way, and there will be moments where it's like, we haven't played D&D together in like 4 months. What's going on with that? Alrighty. So to dive into our first kind of general set of questions, these questions are on general DMing, but I am personally very excited to dive in here since these questions largely focus on something that I personally haven't really interacted with and something that you brought up, modules. So, as someone who has only ever run homebrew, I have never touched a module. I will never touch a module with a 10-foot pole. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts and perspectives. Makayla, why am I wrong to hate modules?
you shouldn't hate them. You can decide not to run them, and that's perfectly fine, Bill. But modules, it's like almost another form of media. Like if you're gonna base off your game on, some sort of movie or TV and just get the vibes for that, you can do the same thing for modules as they give you inspiration of what you can insert into your own games. And it doesn't even have to be exactly like the module itself. But you can take the skeleton story plot line of it and adjust it to fit your game and the theme that you're running in. So, like my favorite module to run, that's always been different, no matter how many times I run it, is the starter kit Lost Mine of Fendelver. Like
Really?
I can adjust. So I'm currently starting to run this, but putting it in the Critical Role's World of Exandria, specifically Wildmount. And I don't want to do spoilers, even though this adventure's been out for a long time. But I'm making story changes to it to adjust for the setting.
That's very cool. I haven't heard of a DM doing a twist like that before. I'm interested to hear about how it plays out though, because obviously taking a module and kind of transplanting the setting sounds like a really interesting way to kind of spruce it up and obviously change certain things while still keeping the core adventure roughly the same. So I would really want to hear about how that turns out.
Yeah, I just had my session 0 for it. So next week, session 1.
Dang, that means I can't use this interview to wiggle my way into your table. Unfortunate. Uh, excellent. So, you've talked a bit about, kind of your favorite D&D module to run. When it comes to modules specifically, one thing that I personally have never gotten a grip on when it came to them, which is why I do homebrew, is pacing. So I'm wondering, how do you handle pacing within a module, whether that is pacing out the encounters on a session by session basis or just pacing things out across the entire adventure?
I tend to go like a session or 2 at a time where I'm like, at least in these 2 sessions, we should hit these specific encounters or chapters. Um, or within that chapter, it can be a little bit lengthier of what the players can accomplish. But then, yeah, you don't have to stick to a module. So I'll even add in my own homebrew mini encounters in between if I think the players are moving too fast, or even if the players are moving too slow. You can, I do like an interrupting piece NPC. So if they're like having a really long role play moment, which is perfectly fine, I like it because my games tend to be a little bit more focused on the role play, but I can interject an NPC, whether that is a creature, a monster, or an actual like humanoid, to get them moving in one direction.
See, I really love that because for me, that's just causing an ogre to come crashing out of the woods. But what you said sounds like a lot better DMing advice, so I should probably follow that instead.
I have had the wild boar run through a camp.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
just
done it.
the random wild animal. It
Yes,
works wonders. You'd
it
be
does.
surprised.
They hear a crack of a branch in the woods, and they're like, "Oh crap!"
Oh no, it's obviously the DM ambushing us with a rust monster. And then, a lizard scurries out and you're like, oh, well, okay. But yeah, so you kind of talked about how sometimes you add in your own homebrew or kind of your own improvised stuff. When it comes to running modules, how much do you tend to balance between running the module as written versus adding in these encounters? Like maybe a rough percentage of like
Yeah.
60% raw, something like that.
Well, keep in mind, like modules don't have every single role playing element, right? So the players can always do things not in the module. Otherwise, you would be kind of static or very back and forth of like, okay, you're going to this castle. What do you do? They go into this room and you're like, oh, there's three skeletons. Roll initiative. It's a lot more than that. It's like your old standard homebrew game where you're adding more descriptions. You can add in anything else you'd want, role play or like other encounters or scenarios. But overall, I would probably say now that I've at least if I read through the module and it's like pretty easy to understand, uh, I would stick to it about 60 to 70% of the time. Whether or not, like, for example, the Lost Mine game, I'm changing quite a bit of it. So in this case, it would probably be the other way. Like about 40% is the actual module, and the other 60% is me just using it as like a skeleton and I'm fleshing it out.
Yeah, who would have thought changing an entire setting of a module would have such a big impact on it? Certainly not I. But
Yeah.
no, what you said really makes a lot of sense. I know I hate on modules every chance I get because I'm a hater at heart. But ultimately, like having that freedom is something that I feel like a lot of people who don't run modules don't understand about them. Like they think that it's this very structured and rigid, like, here are the only things you can say in this encounter, and then you're going through. And if your players do something outside of that, you're left to the wind with no options. So knowing that, every module in some sense is going to require adding in descriptions, adding in different encounters, perhaps more tailored to your players, that's always going to be present. And that's really important to understand when it comes to running those modules, or if you're a newer DM who is maybe a little scared of them, as I was when I first got started. Now, as people go through adventures, eventually, of course, you reach this climactic ending, whether it's a module or homebrew. But specific to the games that you run, Makayla, how do you design a climactic kind of final boss battle? What is going through your head when you're figuring that out?
I love this question. Excuse me. Uh, Definitely a dramatic entrance. Hands down, make it terrifying or really cool. Either way, uh, I don't necessarily have to do a monologue, but those are also fun.
You never have to, but come on. I mean,
Exactly. If they can speak. Fun ones can be like if they don't actually speak, but they're telepathic.
ooh, I love that. Do the
Yeah,
monologue, but only
in
to
their
one
head.
player.
Oh, yeah, one player, or even like you just hear it in your head, and you don't actually see the BBEG yet. You just hear their voice.
Oh,
Again, a
yes.
dramatic entrance.
Yeah. You love a good entrance, honestly. It makes the big bad. I'm sure, like running through Curse of Strahd, 90% of it is prepping the entrance of Strahd, and then the rest of it is, I guess, all the horror and fighting and whatnot. I don't know. Never run Curse of Strahd, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, a good entrance can really sell a great boss battle until your paladin rolls a nat 20. But
Oh,
that's a
yeah,
different
we don't
issue.
talk about that yet.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely had a dragon tear down from the ceiling of a cavern to peek through.
Oh my goodness. That
Yeah,
sounds
and they look up
petrifying.
and they just see, like, a dragon's eye and just more dirt falling from the ceiling.
Well, remind me to bring my anti-dragon bows next time I get into one of your games. Now, this last general question on DMing is one that is near and dear to me because you'll get a different answer from every DM you ask it to. Makayla, what is the hardest thing about being a dungeon master?
Finding time to prep, even if they are modules, so I don't know how you homebrew folks do it. That's kind of why I run them because I can just have them be set up pretty quick.
Hey,
Just time,
sometimes you're in your third stand-up meeting of the day. You haven't talked in 3 hours. You're already out of coffee. Your mind's got to do something to stay engaged. So why not prep your encounters? Don't tell my boss I said that.
I have definitely prepped during work.
Yeah, prep is. I mean, even when I think about it, like using the word hardest or even hard, it feels wrong, but also so right in a weird way because yeah, prep is time consuming and that dedicating that amount of time to it, whether you're homebrew or module, uh, is difficult. At least if you're like, an adult. If you're younger, still in school, you tend to have a bit more free time than the average, working age adult. All the more reason I wish I'd gotten into D&D when I was a kid instead of in my 20s. But I digress. Still working on that time machine though. But yeah, incredible, incredible answers. Really opening my mind to modules. Still not going to try them, but good to know that they're not as evil as I make them out to be. But next up, I want to pivot over into a couple thought-provoking questions. Questions that really kind of delve deep into your thoughts on the relationships between DMs and players and kind of how to manage those. The first of these, and take as much time as you need on these, how do you determine how much freedom to give your players?
Uh, for, I guess, specifically in my experience in module games, luckily I tend to go over this in a session 0 uh, of like, you know, there are plot hooks, you should follow them. Um, Now, if I think they're going along with something else, but I can wrap it back around to make sense to fit it back in, 100%. I'll still do it and give them that leeway to explore a little bit and not be so rigid and like, oh, yeah, you can only go to this next, general store. No, you can go to a bathhouse, a blacksmith, anywhere else, and that's just more of like a shopping episode. But no, it's open, even though it's not in the writing. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly. And I think that's a really fair take on it, honestly. I feel that's where most DMs end up, where it's like you really do want to give your players a certain amount of freedom. Specifically, to follow up on that, though, I am curious when it comes to having a player at your table that is explicitly and above table doing things because they want to not follow the plot. That player, so to speak, of, oh, well, all the hints are telling us to go across this bridge. I'm going to turn the other direction and I want to go pursue my backstory. Like, what do you do with a player like that who is kind of very blatantly going against the adventure that you have prepared?
That isn't so hard to answer. I would basically confront them and give them the option. If you decide to do this, you can do so. However, You'll probably be sitting there for about 2 more hours while the other people are actually participating in the quest. Because as you go along that path, you find nothing. So it's up to the player if they want to sit there and watch everybody else having fun, or they can join in on the fun themselves.
Yeah. And of course, 100% agree. I have had those players. They're not fun. But yeah, when it comes to etiquette issues like that, I feel like specifically newer DMs tend to think like, oh no, I have to allow my players to do anything. And that's not necessarily true. You know, if one of your players is explicitly being a jerk about it, you can, to use the overused term, railroad them a little bit. But on that same note of kind of railroads and players going off of them, specifically with the modules that you run, I am curious, how do you handle a campaign that has gone off the rails? What do you do within a module to kind of get your players back onto what the adventure expects them to be doing if they find themselves getting distracted?
Like my one group deciding to basically have me run a dating simulator on a ship. That definitely happened for at least 2 sessions. Everyone was fine with it, even I was, but they knew after the end of this ship ride to their destination, uh, back to the game.
Oh, that answer caught me at a bad time. I was taking a sip of water. I was not expecting the D&D dating game, but
Yep, it happened.
that's
Yes.
awesome.
It was really fun actually because I think one player wasn't able to make a couple sessions, so it ended up being a bonus game within the game.
Oh, that's so. I'm getting FOMO now from not being able to experience this. This is so unfair. Oh, that's incredible. But yeah, having those little like mini adventures. You know, my own group is having a session coming up where, you know, one of our players is not going to be available for scheduling, and so we're going to purposefully go off the rails. And I'm sure our DM has a great plan for getting us back on it. But yeah, just finding ways to kind of navigate and push players back to the main plot is forever relevant in D&D. I think DMs for now, you know, in 5.5e all the way up to 10th edition, if we ever get there, you know, we'll still be asking the question of, my players did something I didn't expect them to do. How do I
Yeah,
get them back to the plot?
you swing with it.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
for it.
Just got to roll with the punches.
Yep.
Excellent. As I recover from my water drinking debacle, we can pivot over to some more creative questions. So, this first one here, I have my own opinions, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm so curious. If you could play in a session with any famous dungeon master, who would it be? And you can't say Bill.
Darn, you got me. Um, I would probably have to say, Brennan Lee Mulligan. He's a blast to
Yes.
watch. I know. Honestly, probably, like, 6 years ago, I probably would have said Matt, but I really enjoy Brennan's DMing style. He cracks me up. I'm just there for the laughs at that point.
100% with you. I've been a Brennan Lee Mulligan stan since the first day I bought my starter kit. Fantasy High stays the goat. But aside from my own personal bias, yeah, I feel like he would be a great person to play with. Incredibly creative, and of course, Matt Mercer as well, incredibly talented DM. But definitely when it comes to even famous DMs, I often think about, you know, would I enjoy their style? And I start thinking, you know, watching the game, how they run games and things like that. And I'm like, oh, you know, I don't know if I would enjoy being in a group with this DM or that DM. But Brennan Lee Mulligan can invite us on any day of the week. Hey, Dimension 20, you know, hit us up. But yeah, objectively the best answer. Honestly, I thought you were going to say Ginny D, but I feel like she's also a great DM to play with. Now, outside of, you know, getting to play with our idols here, I want to ask you another kind of more creative question. Just because, for those of you who may not know, Makayla helped me out a ton with our initial spellcasting script here on Altrole because I hate casters with a burning no, I do not hate casters. I just don't know that much about spellcasting. I'm a fighter main, and so you were really helpful with getting spellcasting started for us. And so I would like to know if you could redesign the rules for spellcasting. And for time purposes, we can just say, if you could change one rule,
I mean,
what would you change?
right. Oh my gosh. That's a big question. I will say that I have played a spell point sorcerer before. It was a blast, but it felt very overpowered. uh,
Really interesting.
because you have the option, and I say, like, if I could change it, I would kind of see what it would look like across the board because I know the other casters in the party could not do it. It was specifically for sorcerers because they also had sorcery points on top of spell points,
Right,
and they were
right.
just combined in one single pool. Uh, because then you can just use your points. Like there's an equivalent of like however many points for a third level spell, and you could cast as many third level spells as you wanted with the points you had. You weren't limited to the spell slots in specific spell levels. So it can get very strong. Except the one caveat was I think you could only like after like 6th level spells and higher, you can only cast them like once. If you ever
Ooh,
had,
yes. So,
yeah, if
so
you
there
had
is
that
like a
resource
little bit
pool.
of a trade-off, yeah.
A little bit. I don't know. That's a lot of third level spells.
Yeah, and I guess the question is at the end of the day, like, is your game gonna get to high enough level where you're casting 6th level spells at that point?
Exactly. Or you just keep on fireball
Yeah, just fireball
everything.
yeah, my
Everything.
goodness.
Um,
I I almost wonder if spell points would almost be better, not better, but like make sorcerer feel more distinct from other casters like wizards who have slots, but sorcerers are different, so they use points. If that would be better or worse for the game.
right. One other thing that I only have very minimal knowledge on, uh, and this wouldn't necessarily change things for just spellcasting, but Pathfinder's uh, like 3 action rules that they have, I kind of like that a lot too. um, but I haven't really played Pathfinder that much, only a couple sessions. But the 3 action system, uh, allows you to do like multiple attacks, but you get a negative modifier to them. So
Yeah,
something along those
yeah.
lines with spells, like, oh, this spell costs 1 action, this spell costs 2, and you're still able to do both compared to like D&D's action and bonus action system.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not obviously. I've never played Pathfinder, but of my readings of it, I've always been more a fan of the 3 action system than how D&D does, like action, bonus action, reaction. So yeah, very, very interesting answer though. That I'm probably going to keep thinking about that later, which is a testament to how thoughtful your response was because getting me to willingly think about spellcasting is a feat in of itself rather than just thinking about the next, dex-based fighter I'm gonna make or something. I don't know.
Don't worry, Bill. We'll give you Magic Initiate as your feat this time around.
Woo! I might even play an Eldritch Knight. But yeah, excellent, excellent. So we have gone through kind of our general questions and we've gone through some creative and thought provoking ones. Our next questions here are more focused on player interactions. So, as a DM, how do you really interact with your players? What types of things do you think about when you are working with your players at the table? The first question of which being, how do you handle players who want to play evil aligned characters?
Funnily enough, this kind of came up in my session 0 today. Now with my newer groups with people, and they are strangers that don't know each other, uh, for the most part. Occasionally, I'll pick players from my games and like one shots and bring them over to my campaigns. But in this case, we don't know each other at all. So because of this, I tend to say no evil aligned characters, but I preface it with because most people don't actually know how to play evil characters. You know, we tend to see people just being mean to each other, right? Oh, they're stealing their items, they're murder hoboing. Uh, but for evil aligned characters, there actually is a main goal, and they have to understand that sometimes you have to help others to help you get to your goal, whether or not that is against the party's wishes because they don't know it.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point to bring up. I mean, people forget that like selfishness is generally considered to be a more evil trait, even if you're not like killing everything that moves. But yeah, I mean, the distinction between players you know and randoms that you're playing with for the first time is also very important to drive home because I think with my table, you know, I've been in 3 campaigns with some of those players. So I know, like, if they're coming to me with a concept for like an evil aligned character, the story they're bringing with it is probably really good and not going to infringe on the fun of anyone else at the table. But if I have to see another Gloomstalker Ranger Assassin Rogue
Assassin.
multiclass,
Yes.
I'm going to lose it. Very, very good advice there. So, next up, what do you think, Makayla, is the best way to help new players learn the game? And there is a correct answer to this one.
I always link them to Altrole because we
There you
host
go.
really friendly
I don't
classes.
I don't like that you paused after friendly.
Friendly, yeah. No, totally friendly classes that everyone can listen to. If Bill is running a class, guess what? I'm gonna be there and listen to him. I can't help myself.
Yeah, I'm simply that good, folks. You heard it here first.
But of course, the other best way, if players just like really want to jump into the game, is definitely play in one. Whether that's a one shot or a beginner friendly game that most likely starts at like level 1 or level 2. Nothing from level 5 up. You're not there yet, newbies. Slow your roll. Uh, Personally, when I have brand new players to my games, I like to start off with a little kind of like a coliseum match or pit fighting, but it's not just fighting. It is more of a team building exercise. Think of like an obstacle course, but capture the flag. Instead of just killing the creatures that are inevitably going to run rampant in here, you have a goal to bring this egg to this nest over on the other side. Uh, so the dragon mom can be happy again. Something along those lines. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, there's traps, uh, creatures running amok, trying to get in your way, and other things, obstacles, or just like objects that could possibly help you on your little mission, which allows the players to like do interactions with their actions instead of just attacking. Obviously, combat in there, saving throws, skill checks, you name it. So they get used to rolling, understanding what advantage and disadvantage is, all of those kind of what I would consider basic things to know for D&D.
100%. And I'm taking these notes because I'm going to email HR about a work, you know, Coliseum pit fight for team building, but
Yes.
I don't think they're responding to my emails anymore. However, I agree 100%. Being able to get people into the mechanics of the game by doing it is one of the easiest ways for people to truly, like, quote unquote, get it. Obviously, when there was that interview with the Punisher, oh goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking on his
Yes, I
name.
know.
John Bernthal. Yeah,
Yes.
there was that clip of him and one of his co-stars where she just kind of launched him into it, and I was like, wow, that's like the best way to introduce D&D to somebody. So yeah, just being able to get practical, hands-on experience with it is a really, really great way to learn. On top of Alt Roles courses where we teach you. Okay, I'll stop. I promise. But yeah, I will also ask: do you find that tends to be helpful with, or would be helpful with other systems outside of D&D as well? Like, Pathfinder, for example. Just get someone in a game of Pathfinder, and they'll get what it is.
It will definitely take longer than others. I feel Pathfinder has a lot of rules that you have to search for, or just
No, yeah,
go for it. Uh, yeah, Pathfinder has a lot of rules. I've run a couple sessions of like Call of Cthulhu way back in the day for me, but it wasn't that hard to pick up either, since it's just like that D100 system.
right. Yeah, there are so many other nuances of like learning the game when it comes to different systems. It's like, well, how
Yeah.
complex is the system? Is it like a one-page rules of like here's how to make your character and then go ham, or is it Pathfinder 2e?
Oh, yeah, because it could be a lot for just combat can be a lot. Or is it more roleplay heavy? Then you don't really have to worry about too much of like a tutorial because it's just like, oh, if it comes up, then yeah, you'll finally roll. But until that happens, it's mostly roleplay.
Exactly. Excellent. So yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Join Altrole, attend our courses. We will teach you everything you need to know. So we talked about evil line characters, but yes, here we are. So here's a good one, considering I'm being a bit indecisive right now about the question. How do you keep a game moving when your players are being indecisive? They're not willing to choose one specific action when you've given them some choices.
Yeah, there's a couple ways you can run this. Either above table, uh, I can either like state out the facts, right? Of you have this option, and that option. And then ask them questions. Do you think any of them are time sensitive? And that might immediately be like, yeah, we should probably do this thing. Um, Other than that, you can also, I think we talked about this a little earlier, uh, interrupting NPC
Yes,
to get them
yes.
going.
Oh yeah, just having a little. See, this is why I love having a little like helper NPC with the party. Not necessarily a DMPC, but
Right.
in our current game, our DM has given us a magical skull that talks to us, and mostly he sasses us about the mistakes that we're making. But occasionally, he does have good advice if we're like, "Hey, what should we be doing right now?" And it's a way as players to basically go to the DM in character and be like, hey, we don't know what we're doing right now. Can you throw us a bone, please?
Do you have your own personal skull Navi?
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
except he makes puns,
Oh.
which is, well, that's very on brand for any game that I'm in, but I digress. Very, very good advice, though. I know spurring your players along is something that can come up, but I've found that in my experience, it doesn't happen all too much, unless you're playing with like a group of brand new players who also have never played with each other before. After one or two sessions, even that tends to melt away and people tend to be comfortable making decisions.
Sometimes you do get the group that is so aware of the other players that they don't want to hurt each other's feelings by saying that's a bad idea. So they keep talking in circles about it. And no one actually agrees on a thing. Because they're like, oh no, we could probably do that too. And so it keeps building into a, a whole plan that you're like, don't really think this is going to work.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I love those plans that shouldn't work but end up working out in the end because the DM is doing far more work on the back end to help us out.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're
The
like,
players
all right,
don't need to know that.
we're gonna kidnap the mayor, and then and the DM's like, all right, where the hell does the mayor live? But yeah, incredible. All right, so we've made it through kind of the majority of our questions here. I do want to take some time to go through a couple more questions that we have, and then I will start perusing through the chat. I know we did have a big bulk of questions asked at the beginning. Thank you. But I will leave some time at the end for kind of any general audience Q&A as well for people who want to ask Makayla something as well. But for now, I still have the floor. So, Makayla, what advice would you give to new or aspiring dungeon masters?
Go ahead and jump in, but don't hit the bottom of the pool yet because there's a lot of work into being a DM and setting up. So you'll want to do a little bit of research of how you're going to find your players, um, as well as, of course, what game are you going to play. But if those players are brand new, you might want to start with something really easy. You don't need to jump into a level 10 homebrew game. Definitely start small, but have fun with it.
Could not agree more. The amount of times I've seen a brand new DM say, I'm going to homebrew my own system for this one,
Yeah.
manga or anime that I watched. I'm like, you don't have to do all that, but I mean, whatever you find fun. But yeah, no, starting small
Yeah.
is 100% helpful. I wish someone had told me that when I was first getting started. On that note as well, what is one thing that you think every dungeon master should try at least once in their campaigns?
I think they're kind of small things. I think that it wouldn't be hard to give it a try. Would be hex crawls. I've only done it once in one mini campaign, but it was pretty fun. And then try a vertical battle map.
Vertical battle maps. So to clarify, do you mean like a battle map that accommodates for 3D space, or do you mean like just orienting your battle map to be vertical instead of horizontal?
uh Kind of the first, but instead of a top bird's eye view, it is like against a wall. So picture a party trying to uh, go up a cliff, like the cliff face
Oh,
itself. So they have to jump from like edges of a cliff upwards to get to the top, but they could be battling a harpy or something. But there's no way for them to like jump, towards us, like the viewer. You can only move against the cliff face, but only up and down.
that is really cool. Yeah. I'm already thinking of ideas on like where I could have used that when like my players were descending into a chasm and like rock climbing down. That's really
Exactly.
cool.
Yes.
I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that idea. I'm fully telling you now. Theft is happening.
Of course, it can get a little wonky when players can fly, but
Well, I mean, just
they'll figure it out.
yeah. Oh, your players can fly? Ugh, the
Well, then they're
goblins
not
have nets,
climbing up
guys.
anyways.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it can work out in certain circumstances, but definitely give it a try if you can think of a place to put it.
Oh, 100%. Now, we've talked about this a little bit with regards to scheduling and stuff, but given, the burdens of, life, loved ones, partners, jobs, all of that stuff, in this modern world, how do you keep yourself inspired and motivated to continue creating and running games?
Uh, all the kinds of good, fun media out there, and definitely taking breaks because I have recently been on one just to refresh myself and give me time to be in the right mindset to prep and think of some things that I've seen and see if I can implement them in the game. So yeah, it's
Oh,
it's
yeah,
tiring out there
it
running
is.
these campaigns back to back.
I didn't think it would be as draining as it is. So yeah, breaks are definitely necessary. I am forever thankful that my current DM and I, it literally just trade off campaigns with each other where I'll finish one, then he starts one that I play in. And when ours finishes, I'll have to run one for him. Or not have to, I get to, I should say. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, taking those breaks is 100% necessary. Going back to back, campaign to campaign, goodness forbid, running multiple campaigns at the same time impossible task, just completely draining. So,
It
um,
I've done
yeah.
it. Yeah, I think at my peak a few years ago, I was running 2 and playing in 2 or 3, or maybe I was running, like, 2.5, like, 1 was biweekly, but 2 are weekly, and then playing in 2 games that were also weekly, and I it was kinda drowning. Do not recommend if you have to have a full-time job. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Unless DMing is your full-time job, then definitely play games.
Even then, like,
It's
don't work 80-hour weeks every week. Like, take a
Right.
break.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. I needed to hear that because at one point, I was in 4 campaigns, DMing 3 of them. Bill took a break. Anyways. But yeah, there was a follow-up question that I missed to our discussion on vertical battle maps. Someone had asked, is there any place to kind of find these vertical battle maps? Or is there a
Oh.
specific map maker that you prefer using for these, or do you tend to make them yourself?
Um, let me see. I tend to make them myself because it can be a really plain background, especially like my example of a cliff. It could just look like some like a craggy wallpaper, and then if you need to draw like specific places where the platforms would be, I think it's easiest that way. But there are some out there, I think, that you're able to like, use Google and they're probably on like
Oh yeah.
battle map page.
Oh yeah. There are plentiful battle map artists out there. I'm sure they exist as already pre-made stuff. But yeah, I found that when it comes to unique stuff like that, sometimes building it yourself is just the easiest method forward.
I think the main one that I think I've played on that gave me the idea was, I want to say, Descent into Avernus. And it's actually a vertical cavern system. Like an anthill. Like
Ooh,
imagine like like a, I don't know, those ant
colonies.
sections. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but it's like exactly the same way. You can see the cavern, but it's like a flat plane.
Ooh, I will have to see if I can find that later. That sounds really interesting. You said in Descent to Avernus
Yeah, into Avernus.
or
I
into
was a
Avernus?
player. I was a player in that, and the DM didn't have like the adventuring exploration mode on, like for dynamic lighting. So we physically had to draw out where we previously were because it was like some were dead ends. That was rough. It was fun though. My map was pretty good.
That's good at least, as long as it was fun. Incredible. Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be digging into that one later. Might not get me fully to running modules, but I will definitely check them out. However, it seems like we have a couple minutes to go through some audience questions here before we wrap up our interview. So I'm just going to go through some of these ones and make sure that I'm reading everything in the chat properly. So, first one here, how do you enhance player immersion and storytelling in your game while considering the limitations of digital tools on traditional tabletop experiences?
Limitations? What limitations?
Ah,
It's Foundry. What are you talking about?
exactly.
I'm kidding. I mean, a lot of the tabletop experience, like, in person, you can do online nowadays. I think the main thing that players can't do is talk to one another, like if they were next to each other at a table. However, I tell them, like, I usually do an RP channel in my server if they want to maintain character while a different scene is happening with a player. And then, of course, we have our non RP channels, which is like memes and whatnot, so they can react to what's happening out of character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like those are, I wouldn't say a necessity, like your game can survive without them, but
Mhm.
having them is so much easier because text in a way kind of replaces that ability to lean over and whisper a joke into the player next to you's ear. But yeah, that is definitely one limitation that I've found because I have a bad tendency to make above table jokes.
Right. And maybe also if you're not playing with a camera, like no video, then getting your body language across is impossible, right?
Oh, 100%. As someone who speaks with their hands, playing off camera versus on is a very different experience.
And with that, you have to use a lot of descriptions to real life things if you're, trying to relate something back in the game because you can't just like make a gesture with your hands of like it's this big. You have to start using objects of equivalent size or description.
Oh yeah, you go. It's about the size of a basketball, and your players go, what's a basketball?" Thinking it's in character, and then oh god, now basketball is canon in my world. But yeah, no, I get that. As someone who's only ever played online, I think I am aware of these limitations, but haven't truly experienced them myself. But it is good to keep them in mind.
Last thing, I swear, which kind of ties to this question, but it could just be really funny. Um, well, when you're playing with people online, they're from all over the world, right? And they don't necessarily have the same experiences as you. So when I was explaining like like a tornado shelter, they didn't really know what a cellar, like an outdoor cellar, was necessarily. Because I live in the Midwest. We're a tornado alley. I'm used to that. Other people had no idea what I was talking about. Or if I referenced a picture, they understood, like, oh, yeah, I've seen that in a movie before. I've never
Yeah,
seen one in real life or been in one. And I thought that was kind of funny to think about and having to explain.
yeah, it is interesting. The I guess cultural differences, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term, that can arise when you happen to be playing with an international group, and you go, "Oh yeah, it's kind of like In and Out," and they're like, "What's In and
You
Out?" And you're
know.
like, "Oh,
Oh,
oh no,
yeah.
how do I explain this?" But yeah. All right. So looks like we have time for one last audience question here. So I'm gonna make it a good one here. What strategies do you employ to create a sense of immersion and emotional investment in the campaign world for your players?
That is a really good question. Give me a second to think on this.
Take all the time you need. Yeah, everyone in the chat echoing it as well. Great question.
No.
I wish
Uh,
I'd thought of it.
Definitely get characters' motivations to line up with the NPCs in your world as well. For like, maybe you have a plot line for your campaign. Well, if they don't care about the gods, then why would you have your main campaign plot point be about the gods and whatnot? Uh, I try to do give me motivations and I will help you tie them to the campaign. Or if you are more like player oriented story wise, uh, it's a little easier along those lines because then you can just use that story of their background and implement it in the game itself. It's a little different when you're trying to put that into an already written campaign.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's implied here, but just to really drive it home as well, it's interesting to me because all of this should be happening before session one. Like all of this
Mhm.
happens either during session zero or in your pregame buildup. Like setting the seeds of that emotional investment in the world happens before you've rolled any dice. I mean, it really does come very, very early on. And finding the right questions to ask as a dungeon master to make sure that yes, your players are creating characters that are, going to fit within this setting, but also they're making characters that are going to fit within this adventure specifically. The quests, the themes, the genre itself, all extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, speaking of my session 0, it kind of came up, so a lot of not a lot, but a couple of them were having issues of, like, making sure their backstory wasn't too long or what's the important parts, and I was like, "What I am looking for is, you know, why did your character become an adventurer? If they were younger, why did they wanna become join this career, or if they're older and already had one, what's making them do adventuring now? And then I also want 2 to 3 short-term goals for their character. And then if it's more of a sandbox campaign, then at least 1 or 2 long-term goals. But in this case, I just asked for like 1 major long-term goal for their character.
Very smart. I like that. Yeah, setting those goals is, I would say, something that I try to do as a DM. I won't say I always do it because I had many a player backstory fall by the wayside in my last game because oops, I forgot. But that's just me. But yeah, very, very interesting things to think about. Good questions and fantastic answers, of course, Makayla. So as we are wrapping up here, I'd just like to touch on, do you have any exciting campaigns, projects, or ideas working on that you'd like to share?
Besides my Wild Mount Lost Mine campaign, which is going to start, I really don't have too much going on. I'm taking it a little easier lately since I'm coming off from a break. But I also have an idea for Lost Mine. It is the players actually being the bad guys in it, and they're like almost the
Ooh.
colonizers. So yeah, it's in a jungle theme.
I
Yeah,
love it. Oh
I
my
know.
goodness, yeah.
So, yeah, the players are actually the evil ones, they just don't know it. But I haven't set that one up yet.
Oh,
Yeah, I
I
know.
know. I'm so excited to hear about that one though. That's such a I love good premises like that. I love it. Incredible. Excellent. Well, very much looking forward to those. Now, with that, is there anything else that we didn't cover over the course of this interview that you would like to add or talk about specifically?
I guess I just didn't mention in the very beginning of why I became a DM was seeing all the terrible stories on RPG horror stories, and I wanted to be a, female DM for those women out there who's had bad experiences finding games or even playing games in like a heavily masculine group. So that kind of really jump started. I just wanted to be the safe place for those people.
An incredible motivation and reason to want to get into it, I'll say. Huge amount of respect to it because yeah, like many people, when I was first getting into D&D, crit crab was my entire perception of the D&D community, and I was like, oh my god, this is terrible. What is happening here? But yes, being able to create those places where people feel comfortable, like being creative and being themselves, so important, especially as we continue to go through different editions, quote unquote, of the game, and more people find themselves getting into it as D&D and tabletop gaming becomes mainstream. Those spaces are more important now than ever. With that, the last thing I want to ask you here, if people want to find you on Altrole, if people join the server and want to pick your brain more, kind of see what Makayla's all about, where can they find you on the server? Any specific channels you lurk in, anything like that?
You can mostly find me on Discord. I always have the app ready and available, so you can DM me here. My DMs are open. Other than that, I'm not too much in a public social media way, so you guys can't find me. You can only bug me in one spot. But don't worry, I'm okay with it.
It's great to limit your avenues of being bugged, I think, especially on the internet. But yeah, well, thank you so much for your time and your incredible answers to these questions. I personally have learned a lot more about the perspective of not just running modules, but a different perspective on DMing that will hopefully make me a better GM and hopefully has helped all of you in the audience as well. Of course, with quite a few times of shilling Altrole's courses, because that's what we do here. However, that is all of the questions that I had for you, Makayla. Thank you. And of course, thank you to all of the audience members who submitted questions and were participating and listening in. We really appreciate you all sitting in on these live events. With that, I will go ahead and let all of you go. If y'all have a couple minutes, filling out our post-event survey is greatly appreciated. It lets us know what things we're doing well and what things we might need to work on in the future. And it's anonymous. So if you want to put in there that Bill talks too much, you can absolutely say that, and I will only cry for a couple of hours.
Unless you say, let Makayla speak, then I'll have a laugh too.
Yeah, let her speak.
Let her speak.
Stop letting Bill silence her. Yeah. Oh, no, this has been fantastic. Thank you
Been
again.
wonderful. Wonderful, Bill. Thanks.
Well, have a great rest of your night. Have a great weekend, and I will be sure to see all of you next time.
Crack your dice, let's roll tonight. All the fun in the spotlight. Inside sharp and laughter bright. We're tuning in for delight. Roll for insight, here